Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium's third in a series of webinars on the Supply Chain Management Readiness Assessment, Supply Chain Management Industry Benchmark Comparison, and Process Improvement Prioritization. We really appreciate that you are taking the time to attend today's webinar on building an evolving resilient enterprise, and we hope that your family are healthy and safe. This is the third in a series of webinars. Our first webinar was on supply chain best-in-class benchmarking. Our second webinar was on best-in-class ranking for your organization, strategic, tactical, and operational levels. And today we will be getting again into industry benchmark comparison and process improvement prioritization. And then our fourth webinar coming up is the supply chain readiness playbook for your company. And our fifth will be a capstone. We look forward to your this to be an interactive webinar. And we look forward to your questions. So please keep those questions coming in. And we do have a polling question. At the onset of the webinar, if you log into https://pollev.com, Greg Schlegel 910, click on that link. It's in the chat window. Just click on that and you can answer that question at any time as we make our introductions here. My name is Jim DeVries, the founder and president of Enhanced International Group and a partner of the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. I will be the host for today. And we also have from Uphaven, Jenny Fromm, and we have Cindy and Connor and Claire from Uphaven. So it's fantastic to have them join us to help us support you in this webinar. Featured with me today is Greg Schlegel. Greg will be sharing his vast expertise. Greg is one of the original founders of Supply Chain Risk and Resiliency and former president of Apex, now ASCM. Greg, a few words?
You bet, Jim. Thanks. Pleasure to be here with you today, folks, to talk about our passion, which is supply chain management, supply chain risk. I am the founder of the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium, as Jim mentioned. We got 30 companies and about 1,500 risk professionals around the globe. We'll talk more about that in a minute. I've taught supply chain risk management at Lehigh University for the last 10 years. Still teach ERM, Enterprise Risk Management, at Villanova University here in the States. Spent 8 years with IBM as a supply chain executive consultant. Spent 30 years, perhaps many of you, as a supply chain exec for a couple of Fortune 100 manufacturers. And I've taught supply chain management at 6 different universities. And as Jim mentioned, lifelong member of Apex, now ASCM, culminating in being the president in the late 90s. So great to be here to talk about our passion. Jim?
Back to you, Greg, on background on the consortium.
You bet. You bet. We said we'd give you a little thumbnail sketch of who we are and what we do. On the right-hand side, you can essentially see we have 3 pillars: education, consulting, and software as a service. Again, we have 30 different companies. These companies bring tools, techniques, and methodologies and solutions to help us in the consortium identify, assess, mitigate, and manage supply chain risks. That's, excuse me, that's all we do. On the left-hand side, what we provide are some of these products and services. We have 2 online education courses in supply chain risk and resiliency. They're self-paced. One is a basic and one is dedicated solely to public healthcare and NGOs. We do virtual training like this. Jim and I do 2-3 webinars a week since April of 2020. We used to do classroom training. As an academician, we're actually getting back into the classroom at our universities. We used to do face-to-face, and we're hoping those come back soon. We provide certificates, certifications, we do awareness, we do risk mitigation. We bring best practices in this space from our best-selling book. We coach companies, we help build supply chain risk war rooms. We have solutions that do heavy lifting, as we mentioned, and then we're very proud of our 2 new online assessment tools. I highlighted supply chain management readiness assessment, which we're going to talk about in detail today. And we have another one, which is a prescriptive online 90-day action plan. We're going to talk about supply chain management readiness today in detail. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. Just a little background on EIG. EIG is an exchange of passionate experts to guide your transformation that provides self-generating and self-funding results. We have vetted over 50 consultants, consulting companies, and SaaS providers that are focused on enabling your enterprise. EIG serves as that master integrator to provide you access to the best and brightest companies. We're like a Swiss Army knife. Our team is dedicated to empowering your organization's workforce by leveraging EIG's partners' tenured thought leadership expertise. Our goal is to meet and exceed your expectations with customized, predictable, sustainable, and repeatable 90-day self-funding programs. Reviewing our bicycle slide and describing supply chain risk management, we're going to start by recognizing that the supply chain is an ecosystem. You may have heard the saying that we are only as strong as our weakest link. We take it a step further with the following bicycle analogy: the drive pedal wheel representing the strategy of your supply chain risk management program, how to get there, and the execution wheel being represented by the rear wheel. Our strong drive of the wheel pedal results in many rotations, resulting in positive momentum as long as you're pointed in the right direction. Therefore, the drive chain represents the tactics that keep the momentum so that you can get where you're setting out to go. A strong link strategy to execution ecosystem creates positive momentum for the company, its employees, customers, suppliers, and stockholders. Quoting Albert Einstein, "Life is like a bicycle. To keep your balance, you need to keep on moving." So let's get moving with the webinar. So as I mentioned at the top, this is the 3rd webinar in the series. The first 2 webinars are available. Please let us know if you are interested. We'll send that out to you if you can't find it on the EIG website or the supply chain risk management websites. Webinar 4 is coming up. That's our Tier 4 Supply Chain Management Readiness Playbook. So mark your calendars for that. And our capstone will be on the overall supply chain readiness management benefits, case studies, and readiness for supply chain risk and resiliency, our passion. So here we go. We have 4 tiers in our readiness assessment. We covered Tier 1 and Tier 2 already in previous webinars. In Tier 3, we're going to be focusing on the performance best-in-class benchmark as it's provided, a statistical benchmark comparison aligned to your industry, the supply chain management rating relative to industry performance. We'll get into quartiles and some statistics, and then we'll get into that improvement prioritization part. Moreover, Tier 3 does include coaching and consulting of 16 hours. In Tier 4, we'll get into that readiness playbook. So we had a poll. We have a poll on how comfortable are you in understanding supply chain is performing relative to your competitors. So we welcome you to respond to the survey. So please, we'll pause here just a second or two. It looks like we have a couple people who participated, but give you a chance to log into Greg Schlegel 910 click onto that link. So let's see what the result shows thus far. And it looks like we have some people that not so comfortable and comfortable. There's no right or wrong answer here. We just want to make you more comfortable by the end of this webinar and what we're providing you as a tool. Greg, some thoughts?
You bet. Again, there is no right or wrong. It's just different, and hopefully that through the webinar today, you'll get an appreciation for how we can help you feel more comfortable in terms of how your supply chain is performing relative to your competitors. So we have a lot of questions of discovery. We have a lot of insightful statistics and so forth to hopefully give you an appreciation for how this tool can help you with your supply chain performance relative to your competitors within the same industry.
Great. Again, thank you for participating. We love the feedback. And again, the chat window is open. If you have any questions at all during the webinar at any time, please enter in the chat window and we'll get to you as soon as we can throughout the webinar. With that, we'll get to the agenda. We have five main points of the agenda. The first is what are the compelling reasons to promote supply chain readiness in your organization? And then we'll get into some definitions on supply chain readiness from an industry benchmark perspective. We'll also get into supply chain readiness industry background development, our background of why we developed this tool. And then we'll get into the tier 3 industry benchmark and improvement prioritization tool. Again, this is an online tool that is available to everyone who's interested in it. And then we'll talk about how to get started. So our underlying goal is to make this online, virtual. We are in that kind of virtual world. COVID's still around, and there's still reasons to want to do this remotely. And we've built this tool to support your efforts. With that, Greg, it's all yours.
You bet. We said we'd start with providing you some grounding in terms of compelling reasons to promote supply chain readiness. So with that, we'll move on to the next slide, and we thought we'd share this with you. This is the latest report from CIO Dive magazine here in the US. It talks about supply chain's top CFO business risk concerns. We thought we would share this with you. Pretty compelling, we thought. We'll just go top down and just give you a quick thread. These are CFOs, chief financial officers, folks, not supply chain professionals. So that's why we thought it was, it's more or less an outside-in view of our arena called supply chain. So just top down real quick. Number one on the hit parade for CFOs, inventory management. All right, that's both a concern and improvement. That's top of the list. Next is capital efficiency. Not surprised, these are CFOs. That's becoming critical because remember, cash is king in a crisis. We call cash flow, free cash. We call it the red line item in MBA classes. All right. If you can't produce cash in a crisis, you don't have a business. Third, increased delivery. Sure, that's service. Always a key element in supply chain. Cost reduction. You bet CFOs are always looking for that. Always. It's still with us. ESG. That's economic, social, and governance. That's new to supply chain, the circular economy. It's new and still probably a little mystical, all right? But they can spell it, so very interesting. End-to-end visibility, one of the key elements we advocate and harp on every webinar, because in risk, what you don't know about your supply chain can and will hurt you. So that is still on their mind. And then decrease lead time. they can actually spell that as CFOs. That's good because lead time is money. Time is money in supply chain. So we wanted to share the top items that are of concern and are looking for improvement from the CFO's office. Next. This one's a little different. This is from McKinsey. It's rather recent. It's a detailed discussion of supply chain vulnerabilities, all right, from May of this year. And so McKinsey is doing a lot of work in supply chain management and supply chain risk and resiliency. So they share a lot of information with us. They asked executives in this global study, which of the following conditions makes your company most vulnerable to supply chain disruptions? Now, it is an opinionated statement, yes, and they have deep research capabilities. They put together and categorize 4 different industries. They are the dark blue that you see on the right side or on the top. Dark blue is automotive and assembly. Purple is chemicals. Light blue is CPG, and then green, that light green, is pharma and medical devices. So this is why we like to share information with McKinsey, because they tend to do a good, a deep dive by industry. The y-axis that you see on the graph depicts the overall frequency table of responses from largest to smallest. And then along the horizontal axis on the right side, they've actually juxtapositioned the 4 industry sectors by element of supply chain. And finally, we felt it was pretty compelling to align McKinsey's response to our 13 tenets in supply chain readiness assessment. So we put the readiness assessment tenets on the left-hand side of the chart, and you can see the types of questions they asked, and the disciplines are the elements of supply chain: demand variability, sole sourcing, long input lead times, just in time. You can see it. You're pretty familiar, I'm sure, with all those elements. And then all we did was take their elements and align them with the tenets that are resident in the supply chain management assessment. So, and we feel, you can tee them all up, Jim. We felt pretty strong. We felt pretty good that it's a very good fit and demonstrates, we think, the validity of our 13 tenets within the supply chain assessment tool that we've covered pretty much. In our view, we've covered all the basic elements of a good supply chain process. So we wanted to share that with you. Again, it's a little busy, but we thought it was pretty interesting in terms of taking their elements that they focused on and asked the questions, and then align them with the elements that are resident in the supply chain management assessment tool. So I wanted to share that with you. In this section, we in our 10 years or more of utilizing the tool, we have utilized this tool for over 10 years. The tool basically provides a host of motivations. You can use it for supply chain management and operations, for developing strategies, as Jim said early on. It kind of takes a holistic view in terms of transformation to capture end-to-end value. It provides transformation manufacturing processes inside of the maturity model. It boosts operational health by identifying skills gaps. All right. It essentially fosters competitive advantage, gives you a good as is capability in terms of your supply chain processes. It confirms your supply chain processes maybe you're at a minimum level of maturity, but it does give you an objective as is profile, and you'll see that as we go through all the tiers again. And really the key element as well for us is finally, it gets you ready. You, your team, and your supply chain processes, it gets you better prepared to potentially get into a supply chain risk and resiliency journey. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. So let's start off with some definitions. It's always good to start off with some definitions. And in this case, we're going to be focusing on industry benchmarking. So the first question is, what is benchmarking? So straight from Wiki, I liked what it said. Benchmarking is a process where you measure the success, your company's success against competitors to discover ways to improve. So that is really the cornerstone of this webinar. And why is it important? Well, because if you don't know where you are relative to your competition, then your competition will probably just pass you by. So there's many different benchmarking types. There's books on benchmarking, but what we provide here is a best-in-class benchmark, which is the tier 1, that's free. Your business performance, which is tier 2, which is a little bit of money, $5K, and it also helps in your internal business unit comparison. So that's our tier 2. And again, tier 2 provides you the ability to compare similar core processes across your business units and other companies, regardless of the industry. Now, tier 3 is getting into that competitive industry benchmark, and we'll get into that in detail within this webinar. And then what does it mean to you? We wanted to include in this tier 3 is, how do you use this? So just knowing where you fit in the industry and relative to best in class is one thing, but how do you use it to make it real for you from your importance perspective, and what you're satisfied that's working currently in your program is really the most important thing, so that you can take this home and do something with it. So we wanted to provide you that all in an online experience and with very little effort on your part. And how do you feel about where you are? That's the key here, is are you happy where you are, and do you want to improve? So that's what we're trying to get across in our benchmarking discussion here today. So just a little bit of a recap. Our tier 2 is benchmarking is on our best in class segmentation. And we break it out into strategic, tactical, and operational horizons. And again, strategic is that 1 to 5 years. Tactical, we talk about 1 to 15 months. And then operational is really within the day all the way up to, maybe up to 4 weeks. Some people just describe those windows a little bit differently, but it's important that you have tools to help you in each of those areas. And that's how we laid out the 13 tenets. So again, strategic, tactical, and operational, and we will grade your company on how well you're performing in each one of those levels, so that you have a very clear way of understanding where you need to focus. Again, this is our spider diagram, and best in class is towards the center. The lower the number, the better. And the outer numbers are the ones that you want to work on to catch up. So as we have overlaid here, we have on the right our segmentations. So that's the overall average of that. And then the individual scores in each of the tenets is here. So that gives you an idea of what tier 2 provides. So let's move on to tier 3. Now, tier 3 gets into a little bit more complexity as far as introducing you to this term industry benchmark. And there's really the first deliverable in the industry benchmark is how you perform relative to your competitors, customers, and suppliers within your industry. Again, we are going to introduce you to some statistical terms using the term percentile. A percentile is based on a scale of 0 to 100. So you have 0 here, the minimum, to 100. And it will evaluate the performance of your like industry supply chains from companies within your industry. You'll break them into 4 groups. The laggards, that's that minimum percentile from 0 to 20 point, P25, percentile 25, we say P. Always use the acronym here. Average is P25 to P50. And of course, we have to have multiple names for everything. So percentile 50 is also called the median. And then the followers are the ones that are between percentile 50 and percentile 75. Those are the followers. And we describe the leaders as those percentile P75 to P100, or the maximum. So you can think of taking all the data and cutting it up into quarters, or if you like pies, it's cutting a pie into quarters, not eighths, quarters, because we like big pieces of pie. All right. So again, what is a quartile? It's a statistical term that describes the division of observations into 4 defined intervals based on the values of data and how they compare to the entire set of observations. The quartiles measure the spread of values above and below the mean by dividing the distribution into those 4 groups. And then we have those lower quartile that we just threw in there, the median and the upper quartile. And again, each quartile contains 25% of the data, and generally the data is arranged in this manner. So that gives you an outline of the industry benchmark terms that we'll be using throughout the rest of the webinar. So the question is, where is your company? Are you a follower, average, or laggard within your industry, independent of best in class overall that we covered in tier 2? Okay, and with that, we'll give you a little bit of background of the supply chain readiness development. Again, we start from the upper left, and we're really covering the entire supply chain here. And we start from new product development and engineering, and we walk through sourcing, production, inbound logistics, distribution, and customer management. Why is this important? When you do these surveys with your team in your business unit, these are the stakeholders that need to be involved in looking at your supply chain and evaluating it. So we encourage, when we ask you to fill out the survey, we are looking for this cross-functional group to assess your current performance across our 13 tenets in that discovery interview. Again, the tier 1 tool, it was born out of that first of a kind MBA supply chain risk management course that Greg developed with Lehigh University, he and his team, and it was so well received. They took it on the road. It's over 10 years old. We've used it in classrooms, workshops, webinars. Hundreds and hundreds of folks have taken this survey. It's very well used. And now we've upgraded it with the learning management system platform. And the link to the tool, which is free for tier 1 again, is in the chat window. Please feel free to use it. It's all for you. Greg, I'm sorry, I took that slide.
It's okay. We just wanted to give you a few more grounding elements on benchmarking. Just think of benchmarking, and this is tier 2, tier 3 as well, requires cross-functional collaboration, which Jim just mentioned. We do advocate that we have multiple folks, and anywhere from 5 to 8 different execs from different disciplines. Tier 2 does focus on establishing, as Jim mentioned, strategic, tactical, and operational perspectives across the entire supply chain. That's why we show you this end-to-end picture of customers on the left, all the way through all the elements of a good supply chain arena, all the way from customer on the left to supplier on the right. So we are taking this approach in almost every tier, but tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4 really focus on getting multiple disciplines involved with multiple with different opinions, perspectives in terms of assessment of your supply chain maturity. So with that, we'll move into, I believe, our next benchmark area, and that is we'll talk about tier 3 deliverables. And we started to tee up the industry benchmarking as one deliverable, and we have a second deliverable called improvement prioritization, and we're going to take a look at both. So this is again just a recap of the activity profile of supply chain assessment tool tier 2. We're not harping, but we want to make sure that you understand that this entire assessment tool is what we call accretive. It's kind of like building a house. You put a good foundation down in tier 1, then you start to build on top of that foundation, which is tier 2. And again, tier 2 is, as Jim mentioned, the blue on the right-hand side. The blue elements are strategic elements, our opinion. The red elements in the chart are tactical, our opinion. And the army green on the left are what we call operational tenets. You add them all up, and we think that's a good profile of 13 tenets, 13 supply chain processes that make up a good supply chain arena. So we just want to measure or profile tier 2, and let's go in and show you the entire enchilada. All right, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. We'll try to go through, give you a real nice high overview, and then we'll dig deep for the rest of the webinar and perhaps even answer any questions you might have. So let's take a look. Top right, tier 1 and tier 2. Jim mentioned it. We talked about it. Best in class segment. This particular profile is a persona from an electronics company who has gone through the process. So it's real data. All right. This organization, we consider them on the top a mainstream. They come out with a number 5.7. We categorize them as mainstream. All right, close to being a leader. So we give them a best in class profile, and also then talk about tier 2 in the middle, which is strategic, tactical, and operational. What is your strength based on your response to the survey? This company, their strength seems to be strategic. All right, 4.7. And you can see the numbers below the heading. The lower the number in this assessment, the stronger the tenet, meaning where is your strength and where might you be weak. And so strategic is first, tactical second, operational third, and then we tend to try to give you a Venn diagram that gives you an indication of where the strengths are relative to each other within the 13 tenets. All right, that's tier 2. Tier 3 on the left, the industry benchmark. Jim went through detailed discussion about the quartiles, and in this particular use case, from an industry benchmark point of view, this electronics company is right up there at the top within their industry. They're considered a leader from an industry benchmark point of view. And then down on the bottom, we get into the second deliverable of tier 3, which is improvement prioritization. And so now we go down and profile for you within tier 3. A second deliverable, we ask additional questions. Well, how important are each of the 13 tenets to you? So yes, that's an opinionated question. And then we also ask, how satisfied are you collectively as a group? How satisfied are you associated with the 13 tenets? And so this is tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Within the tier 3, you get 2 major deliverables, an industry benchmark profile, and a profile of how important these tenets are and how satisfied you are and then we move on from there. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. And by the way, there's a Q&A question in there for the assessment. Connor, so if you would copy and paste the link into the Q&A response, that would be fantastic. Appreciate it. And then what we'll get into now is the benchmark. So again, we're going to look at tier 2 building into tier 3. So again, tier 2, we bring in from Ring of Fire, Apprentice, Mainstream, or Exemplar, where you fit there. And in this case, as Greg described for the electronics case study, the overall number was 5.7 for this use case. So the question is, drum roll, is where you are at in the tier 3 industry benchmark performance ranking. And in electronics, they happen to be best in class, as we can see. That, well, I should say best in class, they're leaders, right? So they're leaders, or followers, or average, or laggards. So they are the leaders. But in another industry, they might be a laggard, or another industry, they might be right in the middle, or they might be off the map. So the question is always, no matter what your score is, where are you relative to other companies in your industry? They could be customers, they could be suppliers, they could be competitors. So are you up with the rest of the industry? So that's what this will provide you. And then the second deliverable, as Greg described, is importance versus maturity. And what we do is we ask for each of the 13 tenants, what is your relative importance value of that tenant, in this case, leadership improvements, in relative to the other tenants? And we have that ranked from lowest priority to highest priority. In the middle, of course, is that medium priority. So there you have a sliding scale. You and your team individually can enter that priority for the importance for that tenant relative to the other 13 tenants. We always encourage you to have all the definitions read through before you take the survey that comes out of the deliverable of the free online assessment. And then what we do for this is we plot a bubble diagram, because we love bubble diagrams. We're engineers. So we have importance versus maturity. So on the y-axis, importance from 1 to 10 that has just been scored, and the maturity for each of the 10 tenants are there, and then we plot those very simply. Now, this is sometimes an eye chart, so you always say, where do you want to focus? Well, you want to focus in the upper right-hand corner. In the upper right-hand corner is high importance, and maturity is a high number, which means immature. So those are the ones that you want to focus on from that perspective, as an example here for the electronics. So then the next question you want to ask yourself is, how satisfied are you in your progress, or what's going on in improvements in that tenant relative to the other tenants? Again, is it a lowest priority to highest priority? And here, now we're going to take that importance that we just answered a few minutes ago with satisfaction. So now we have importance versus satisfaction. So now it's going to be the left-hand upper quadrant that we're going to focus on versus the upper right in the previous question or previous plot. So this can get a little bit confusing, and we understand that. So it's always good to simplify. So what we're going to show is we'll take that importance and maturity. The green is good, red is bad. Red is where you want to focus. That can become a little bit difficult over the long term to take these two graphs in. So we turned it into a bar chart. And then what we did from our vast experience, we know from importance maturity where you are going to focus on from a readiness perspective. So as you approach that 60%, you know that that's high readiness. So this company, because they're rather mature, they may not have a high readiness for supply chain improvement as other companies. And so they may have difficulties in driving further improvements in there. So that's why we want to look at not just importance and maturity, we want to look at importance and satisfaction of the organization. So again, the upper left quadrant in this case is where you want to focus, and the upper right quadrant is what's working well. Again, this can get confusing looking at these quadrants. So we have simplified it. And here you have, again, our bar chart where we have high readiness for supply chain improvement. Now we know where we want to focus. In the upper top here, we have supply, integrated supply chain, risk mitigation planning, and agility, our top 4. And so now you have 2 things to look at to prioritize which of the tenets you're going to focus on. You have importance and maturity and importance and satisfaction. You have these 2, what I call management charts. So management can sit around and talk about where we're going to focus. And we know that you can't focus on everything. Maybe 3 is too many. Maybe 2 is enough. But this is to drive the conversation to identify what are those areas that you want to focus on and identify your challenges. And from this, you can create a very fruitful meeting, cross-functional meeting with all your key leaders to decide where you're going to focus in your next year or 2 in making improvements in your supply chain. So before I go off the slide, Greg, do you have some added comments that you would like to make on this?
Well, to first blush, it might look a little complex, and it is, but we think it really provides multiple directions and multiple threads where you can kind of hone in on both the importance from a maturity point of view and how satisfied the different disciplines are within your supply chain arena who are answering the survey question. So it's a good push-pull, and if you add them together, this chart to us is more or less the 1 + 1 = 3. All right. It's really kind of value added because we'll talk a little bit more about it in terms of how to move forward effectively. So that is really our goal, is to bring out the information, and so that we can help you lead, guide, direct, and coach you in terms of improving satisfaction and improving your maturity, all for a better bottom line, and perhaps to get better prepared to do a supply chain risk and resiliency journey.
Thanks, Greg. And I just noticed that there's a question in the chat, so I'll answer that. He asked, is this assessment an internal one, or can it be used to assess sub-tier suppliers? I would think that that's what it says. And from my perspective, having your suppliers take this assessment, especially as part of your supply chain, program for your supplier management program, let's call it, and having them take this is a great way to help them in their supply chain journey and align it to you and your company. So I would encourage you to use it for your suppliers. Greg, some additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, terrific question. Very good question. I would echo Jim's comments, because what you could do is, if you as the customer go through and demonstrate that you are thinking overtly, funding resources, you're going to look at it at your supply chain with a critical eye and improve it. Once you do that, you can take that to the bank, and basically you could even lead, guide, direct, and coach. Once you've gone through the different tiers, you could coach your key suppliers in your supply base to essentially help them help themselves. So, very good question. I agree. Not only internally, we would always advocate, we as practitioners would always advocate, do it do it, try it, fix it in your own house, clean up your own house, demonstrate you're committed, then take this as a tool and then lead, guide, direct, and coach to improve your maturity and satisfaction in your supply base. Everybody wins. Everybody wins.
So
It's a great question.
win-win. It's not just
Yep.
a win-win, it's a triple win. There you go. So loving that. So just as a recap, we for tier 2, there's 2 deliverables that we discussed. The tier, you get where are you in your industry and your prioritization of the tenants and to help you with your program. So Greg, any additional thoughts on this?
Well, it is a recap. We're going to get into the last section here. We're looking pretty good on time in terms of how to start, but there is a second question from Clement. And the question is, are there any case studies ready to share for the work done in public healthcare? We would say, yeah, absolutely,
yeah.
Positively. We have hundreds. All right.
Yeah.
We just, because of time, Clement, we picked electronics, but yes, we do. We have it. We have data points from 10 years now through maybe 8 to 10 different industry sectors. So yes, the answer is yes. We just don't have the time at the moment today to do it. So a good point, a little teaser, maybe what we'll do is write this down, and in tier 4, we'll bring up this data for public healthcare. Hopefully that we'll see you on the tier 4 webinar. We'll try to put what we call NGO public healthcare case study in that particular webinar coming up. All right. Hopefully that answers your question. All right. You bet. Okay. Very good. Good question. All right. I think we're at our last section. We're looking pretty good on timing. We said, well, how do you get started on this? So we wanted to give you again a little kind of lead, guide, direct, and coach you through the tiers. So with that, we'll move into the next slide. Again, this is a little bit of a recap. Tier 1 readiness assessment. It's for one person. It is free. We've gone through the graph. 13 tenants. Remember this. If you go to the website, which is on the bottom, we have 2 tools. We have a basic tool for basic industry, and we have a second tool dedicated entirely to public healthcare and service organizations, such as logisticians who only move product and don't manufacture product. So I wanted to make that perfectly clear that we got 2 tools that you can leverage. It only, you could do it as a team. You could get in there and answer questions as a team, but it's not built for multiple individual entries. Take a look at it. Let us know how you feel about the process, who you collaborated with, in terms of answering the questions. If you have any surprises, if you do, what were those surprises? We'd be more than willing to hear from you. And that's why we place the website and our 2 email addresses. This is where you start to get your objective as is condition. All right. So with that, we'll move forward. And again, recap tier 2. The readiness assessment, basically, we went through the graph again. Jim talked about it. In tier 2, you get a profile of your strengths, whether it's strategic, tactical, and operational. You get a picture image of your as-is condition. All right. You get a picture image of the Venn diagrams that are indicative of your strengths and weaknesses in those areas. On the top left, you get a gauge from a best in class. Again, these are accretive, remember, tier 1. Now you're doing tier 2, a little different. And essentially, you go through questions of discovery, and then ultimately it provides you an assessment of Do you know how you are aligned and what your strengths are and what your weaknesses might be within the 13 tenets? So, and remember, tier 2, it has a price tag, and that price tag comes with 8 hours of consulting. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim and he'll finish out.
Thanks, Greg. So we'll get into tier 3 here. And I think we described it pretty well as we move from tier 2 to tier 3. And the insights of, where are you relative to best in class in tier 2? So you do get everything in, in the price tag that you'll see here in a minute. It does include tier 2, as Greg says, it's accretive, and it gets into where are you relative in your industry and what does it mean in terms of supply chain management maturity. And then fourth, how do you prioritize your improvement efforts and how do you go about improving? So those are the key insights. The deliverables are, it establishes an objective as is supply chain position relative to your competition. It acts as a best-in-class and industry benchmarking vehicle to evaluate future supply chain improvements. You get into those quartiles that we discussed. And again, this is the 12K, but again, there's more deliverables than this. There's the deliverables of providing you direction for your future to strengthen your supply chain, aligned to your market, and provides observation of performance gaps, high-risk areas relative to your industry throughout the 13 tenets, and provides initial risk assessment level set action plan. Again, you get 16 hours of consulting and coaching to support you and your team throughout this effort to get you and your team going in the right direction from this perspective. So hopefully you find that compelling. And so the next question is, how do you get started? Some helpful hints. So again, to get started, pick a business unit or a product line that's familiar. Confirm your lead coordinator for the program. Make sure that you have that cross-functional team of a minimum of 5 to 8 stakeholders. You could have up to 13 or 14, that's fine. It's up and down your supply chain, all those stakeholders assigned to the lead, and complete the tier 2. So you want to complete tier 2 first so that you can then get ready for tier 3. So you then register for that tier 3. And we could do the 5 and then a 7K. We could do it in increments if that's what you want to do. And then you'll log in. And once you enter tier 3, each of your folks will log into our online system, and they'll enter the importance and satisfaction of each of the tenets of the 26 questions independently. And then all registrants will have completed the survey, and the tier 3 results will be provided, all the graphs and a report that we will generate for you. And then, of course, the final 16 hours is we will tailor a program for you that meets your needs on how you would like us to coach you. We can do everything from executive coaching, coaching of just the leaders, or coaching within your cross-functional team that have taken the survey. So we are very flexible in what you would be looking for. Greg, some additional thoughts?
You bet. Again, it's accretive. Hopefully we got that point across to you. We think it's 1 + 1 + 1 = 5 as you move forward. Tier 3 is cross-functional. We advocate that and we stress that so that we get different opinions of where you are. That's all good. That's what we're looking for. And then we're actually very excited about the multiple deliverables and the graphical outcomes and the coaching of tier 3. So hopefully this appeals to you, and we wanted to make sure that we tried to give you a good sense of what tier 3 can provide in terms of value add.
Great. And just to wrap it up again with our placard slide of the 4 tiers, we've gone through it in pretty good detail at this point in time. So if there's any questions on any of the tiers, please do reach out. You have our emails in this presentation will be sent to all the participants, registrants, and on the website, you can contact us at any time, and we welcome your feedback. So again, this is the third in a series of webinars, and next month, at the end of the month, last day of the month of August, we'll get into tier 4, the supply chain readiness playbook for your company, and most likely we'll have an NGO case study to share with you on that webinar. And then we'll get into the capstone. There's so much data, so much information to share with you. We feel like we're compelled to have that capstone webinar. We probably could do 3 more webinars, but we'll probably limit ourselves to that 5th webinar. And we look forward to your feedback at any time of what you think about the program, the offering, and anything that we can do to help you on your supply chain journey. We are here for that. Greg, parting words?
Yep. Again, hopefully we gave you a sense of the 3 different tiers, especially the benefits to be derived and the deliverables of tier 3. The ultimate approach that we're taking is to help you know where you are relative to your industry's supply chain prowess. All right. So think of it. We give you overall position. We provide you a profile of your strengths and weaknesses by tenant. We give you a sense of what you might want to improve and also how to improve that to move forward in supply chain maturity. Again, we're doing this to help you improve your supply chain process maturity and also potentially get you better prepared to actually do supply chain risk and resiliency. So with that, again, we appreciate your attendance, and we're ready, willing, and able to answer any questions today, and or if you want to send us an email, we will get on that real quick and provide you the best answer that we can. So again, thanks for attending.
Thanks, Greg. And with that, that concludes our webinar. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We look forward to you joining our future webinars. And again, we look forward to your feedback. With that, have a great day, great evening, and a great rest of the week. Cheers.